All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is Brian, and we usually only have two people, but tonight we have three. So I'm here with both Jay and Justin, and we're going to go over this humongous 13-game slate for Wednesday night, which is a couple of days before Christmas. And since there's so many games, I'm not going to let them have time to introduce themselves and say hello. We're going to jump right in. So first game is Boston at Charlotte, 7 o'clock game. I can jump right in. Over-under is 202. Charlotte is 2.5-point favorites. And we'll start kind of Boston side. I guess we can do both sides, Boston, Charlotte, and kind of start with maybe cash plays and then work the tournament. But, Jay, you got the news pulled up. So shoot us with some news, and then we'll kind of talk plays.
Yeah, I got some news. I'm pretty disappointed I didn't get an intro this time.
Sorry, man.
But I'll forget about it. Yeah, so Celtics last time was a pretty interesting spot, lots of value there. I think we could run into that same thing tomorrow. We have Marcus Smart still out. Amir Johnson is questionable with plantar fasciitis. I guess he will probably sit, but he's listed as questionable, so we'll see. And then Solinger is also questionable with his back injury. So those are two guys in the front court. You know, they have a deep front court and all, but those are two guys that if they're out, they open up some really nice value that we saw last time with Olynyk and David Lee.
Yeah, I think if I'm only really interested in this front court for cash if both of those guys are out, Amir and Sully. If only one of them are out, then I think it's very borderline to even really consider because they do have still a lot of bodies in there. Zeller, put in some good minutes too. They probably want to get him a little bit more involved, and obviously they have Olynyk and David Lee and Jerebko as well. So in terms of, we'll just have to see where that ends up. Isaiah Thomas, though, 40-plus DK points, I believe, in 5 of his last 6 games. I think he's probably the guy, you look at, you consider in cash here. What do you think of that? What do you think of the play there?
Yeah, I'm always pretty high on Isaiah as kind of like a fallback cash option. He's not a guy I really try to target right away. Yeah. This is a huge slate, so we have a ton of options at point guard, likely a lot of value. So on this slate, I'm not sure, but yeah, he's been crushing, and this is a really close game, high total for him, and I think it'll be Charlotte's good defensively, but I still think it's a fine spot for him. And then I think Crowder's been playing pretty well too lately at a kind of somewhat thin small forward position often. So I think you could take a look at both of these guys, but I prefer Isaiah in tournament format and Crowder probably in neither, honestly, given the amount of options, but I think he's in the discussion.
If Amir and Sully are out, I like Crowder a little bit more just because they can play smaller and he'll see some more minutes at the 4. But I agree with you that as of now, with assuming everybody's healthy, I'm off Crowder. And yeah, IT's implied at 33 on DK based on this price, and he's been at 40 plus pretty consistently. Yeah. So I still think there's some value there. And, as looking at our models going, 5, 6, 7, points above expectation is definitely puts you right up there near the top of the list. So he's borderline cash.
Yeah, my problem with really all these guys, so Isaiah is fine. Yeah, I'm always kind of okay with Isaiah. I agree with Jay that you can kind of fall back on him, but don't start with him. Jay, I don't really love the matchup here. It's against Batum, so that's not really great to me. And in 13 games, I don't really see a need to do that. And then so the front court guys they're in a tough spot because David Lee ended up playing pretty well and having a solid enough game where if you went in cash you were fine with him, especially at that low price. But he only played 25 minutes even with the start, which is kind of the bare minimum that a guy can get in a start really. So that's not really predictive of something that we're interested in the future. And Olynyk's fine, but his center position eligibility it's. We've talked in podcasts before where center is just a really good value kind of with all guys. They're just really underpricing centers this year. Kind of on DraftKings for sure. FanDuel, they're probably a little higher to where they should be, but you only get one, so it's hard to justify going Olynyk, with the other options. So I'm kind of off really all these guys, maybe Isaiah in tournaments. So I know that's a little pessimistic, but that's just kind of how it
Yeah,
is.
I will say Linux price is only 4,100 on FanDuel. I think if those guys
better, sure.
I think I think it warrants pretty strong consideration. But yeah, they can mix and match and go small pretty easily here in this game, and foul trouble is always a concern as well for Olynyk when they still have bodies to kind of replace him.
Yeah, and he doesn't do anything but score is the problem. Like, he's a center, but he does not ever get a rebound. So, like, that's important to remember. Like, you would expect – like, for me, like, I want my centers to at least be, like, a semi-double-double threat, and Olynyk's not that guy at all. Like, Justin would probably know his per 36 for rebounding, but, like, it's got to be awful. Like, he just never gets a rebound. Okay.
Yeah, Olynyk's at 6.9, I think, rebounds per 36.
Which is just awful for a center.
Pretty bad for a 7-footer.
Right.
Yeah, terrible. So that worries me a little bit. So kind of on Boston for DeMar for sure, especially in third. I mean, again, we'll iterate a lot in this podcast. 13 games, like, don't play a guy that you're not comfortable with. Like, there's so many options where, like, you can find an entire lineup where you're 100% comfortable with guys with this many options. So, like, if you don't feel great about Olynyk, even with guys out, like, find a better thing that you're comfortable with for sure.
Or find a game that doesn't feature 2 Eastern Conference teams.
Yeah, So Charlotte, Jay, what are your thoughts on Charlotte? So obviously some news. Al Jefferson's still out.
Yeah, he's still out for those reasons. Yeah, Charlotte in this spot. I've been high on Boston defensively all season, but they still kind of make a lot of mistakes and give up a decent amount of points overall. So a 202 total, I think is pretty good here with Charlotte's kind of slower pace. So I like the up tempo pace for these Charlotte guys. I think price wise, it's kind of hard to really go a single guy in cash, I think. So I'm not really on any of them in cash at their price points and kind of the way they've been playing and the team makeup, the individual defensive matchups, stuff like that. So I think I like Kemba and Batum still, and mostly tournament format. I probably wouldn't roll Kemba in cash in this game, I don't think.
Yeah, I think they're at 102 total implied, somewhere around there. And for that total in Charlotte, I'm surprisingly not on any of these players. Batum, I'm not on that matchup against Crowder. And Kemba, he's probably going to see a good amount of Avery Bradley, I imagine. And Boston actually has been pretty stout if you just look at DVP versus point guard, surprisingly. So this isn't really a matchup to attack. I think, especially with Charlotte playing a lot of Lynn and Kemba together, they can easily hide Isaiah on Lynn or Hairston or any of those guys. So yeah, I'm not really feeling Kemba. He's been cold lately too. Hasn't been really putting up any big lines, so it doesn't really give me too much incentive to even roll him out in tournaments. And maybe the other guy you look at in a tournament is Jeremy Lin, hoping he gets fuller minutes in this one. Because other than that, I'm not really feeling anybody on the Charlotte team at all.
Yeah, I'm in the same camp. Yeah, definitely no cash, really, any of these guys, mostly because of the matchup with Boston. Yeah, I mean, Charlotte's always kind of like there's a couple guys you're looking at, and I don't love the matchups for Batum or Kemba. So it's definitely no cash. And you're right. I mean, these two guys haven't been that great lately. So, they're obviously the interesting tournament plays. And even still, I mean, I don't mind them in tournaments, but they're definitely not my favorite plays. I probably prefer Batum just a little bit more just because I think, he's $200 more, but I think he should probably be Kemba is just a little overpriced for me, I think, on the slate. And then you could look at Lynn. The question will be whether he can get above the 22 minutes he got last game. He was getting high minutes before that, but it's back down. And that's just really how he's been all season. I obviously watched the Hornets pretty intently. And, Clifford is just really quick on a trigger with Lynn for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it's defensively. Probably is defensively if I had to guess. But he's really quick. So definitely no cash for Lynn for that reason. But it also kind of hurts his upside a little bit too if you don't think that he could, stay in this game defensively, which is a little bit of a question against this Boston team. So, not a super exciting game here to start off with, but
yeah, and Lynn's price kind of crept up a little during that run he went on, so it puts me off him a little more knowing that he's not really solidified for those like 32 minutes that we saw him kind of get, or around that, even more some games. So with the downside of him going 22 minutes like he did last game, it's not someone you're really targeting at over 5K on both sides, really.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, let's keep on moving. Obviously, we got a lot of games to get to. So next game we'll talk about Houston or Orlando, another 7 o'clock game. Over-under is 206.5. So this spread's interesting. Like, before the season, Houston was title contenders, and we would have said this spread would have been like double digits, but it's 1.5, and not even on Houston. Magic are 1.5 point favorites, which is amazing. So Jay, we'll start with you. So some news, especially with Elf.
On the Magic side, Alfred Payton's questionable with an ankle injury. On the Houston side, no injuries really. Just Ty Lawson's returning from his suspension, but it shouldn't really play a big role. He's going to have to fight for his minutes to get back in that rotation alongside like Jason Terry and other useless players. Kind of we're not looking at them really for anything. So on the Rockets side, I think Magic have a better defense than we kind of give them credit for this season. But you look at this total and kind of the way the Rockets have been putting up points lately, then I think there's definitely value here. For cash-wise, I don't think you can really too strongly look at anyone outside of Harden. I like Dwight's price at 7K on DraftKings. That's more of a tournament play with kind of his lowered usage rate lately, and kind of a guy you can't really count on too much. But for that price and kind of his upside in a game where I think he'll have to kind of see a lot of minutes. I really like him as a tournament option, and Harden's really the only guy I'm looking at in cash.
Yeah, and on a full slate, I don't think Harden's going to be up there with my top cash game plays either. You look at on DraftKings over the last 10 games, he's exceeded his expectation just 40% of the time. He's, average plus minus is slightly negative. So, considering his price tag, he just hasn't been exceeding value enough to feel really solid. I think you're most of the time just like paying for him to hit his expectation. That's about it. I don't think there's been he hasn't exceeded value a ton lately. So, yeah, I think, you look at the slate and you got guys like Boogie Cousins, Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook, LeBron, Paul George, Steph Curry. You got so many guys at the top and so many other options that I'd be looking at.
Good matchups too.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, Harden's not a strong cash game play for me relative to the other guys in that price range. You look at the rest of this team and, I'm not really particularly strongly on anyone else. I think Beverly and Alfred Payton, I don't love that matchup for either one of those guys. Ariza is definitely more tournament because he's very game flow dependent and it's kind of dependent on him hitting his threes and getting those steals. And, with that front court is just so much turnover. I know Terrence Jones had a good game, but that was just because Clint Capella couldn't stay out of foul trouble the entire time. So, assuming Capella can go 5 minutes without committing 5 fouls this time around, then I'm off Capella, I'm off Terrence Jones, and pretty much everybody, Donatas Motijunas. People have been buzzy about him, but he's put up just 16.1 in his last 4. Is nothing. He had one big game and really nothing to brag about after that. So yeah, from top to bottom, it's kind of not too strong.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think Harden's okay cash game play, but as these guys have said, it doesn't you don't really have to do that on the slate, just because there's other options. I mean, you got Westbrook and Durant against the Lakers. You have Davis against Portland. So, I mean, you have awesome matchups at the top if you want to pay for a stud, that you don't have to go hard. And I don't think it's an awful matchup, but I don't think it's as good as some of these other ones. So I do think he's an elite tournament play, because I think people will be maybe a little bit off him in tournaments as far as ownership goes. So, obviously he has just as much upside as anyone does. So I think he's a good player to target in tournaments for sure. And Dwight's kind of the same way, but that's kind of it. I mean, I guess you could, like you said, you talk about Beverly or Capella or Ariza or whatever, but those guys just really haven't shown very much upside lately to really warrant even I don't know. Yeah. Like we often we say that like a guy's like any guy's a tournament play, but that's not really true, because we want like actual upside. Like we want a guy, like we want really any guy that can hit 35, 40 fantasy points. And these guys, like even their best game is probably not that. And that's really kind of what it takes to take down one of these big tournaments. So I don't think there's a really whole lot of need to look at these guys other than Harden and maybe Howard in some tournaments. So so that's it. So on the other side, Orlando, obviously Elfrid Payton is questionable, like Jay said. So Jay, how does that potentially change things for you? And are there any cash games on that side?
Yeah, that'll shake things up, I think, quite a bit. Given this total is really high, 206.5. So I think if Elf's out, depending on who draws the start, it could be Oladipo, it could be Shabazz, who hasn't been playing that much. So a guy I'd want to target probably is Oladipo if Elf is out. I think he'll handle the ball a lot more, kind of see a more facilitator role, which is good for him because he can put up a really full line when he has the ball in his hands, especially. So at 6,100 on DK, if Elf is ruled out, that's a guy I like a lot there in that spot with this total. And I think the matchup with Beverly, I don't know how much Beverly would be on him really, especially if Depot plays. He won't play all at the point. He'll be a little off guard. So I think it's a matchup that he could beat. And at that price, I think he has a really good chance of breaking that. And Shabazz, it's tough to recommend him, kind of given his limited minutes and playing time. So it depends kind of if he draws the start. I think it'd be a viable punt play. One that I probably wouldn't go though. I think Depot's the guy you'd want here. If Elf plays, even with this high total, it's kind of how we have been on the Magic lately. With none of them are really like strong cash game plays. I like Vooch generally probably the most, but it's a tough matchup with Dwight down low. So that's a guy I don't think you're kind of throwing in your cash game lineups. Tobias has had huge games lately, but he's not consistent enough for cash. So it's kind of like a good tournament team. I like these guys. I like Vooch. I even like Tobias for tournament. And then if Elf is out, I think Depot breaks into that cash game consideration.
Cool. So my last thoughts on this are, Justin, do you have any?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself there. For Orlando, I think Shabazz is pretty solidly in cash game consideration if he draws a start, because in 2 games this year where he's played 29, 30 minutes, he's put up, I think, 30-plus DK points in both those games. So I think he'll be at 3,500 on DK at his price tag, and drawing the start. I think this is a fairly easy call, given his projected role. And yeah, I'm on Oladipo as well. Especially if Elfrid Payton's out. Let me throw. Any interest in Tobias Harris at all? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So especially if Elf is out, and really kind of even if Elf is in, Tobias is actually one of I don't know. It's hard to do these pods because sometimes we don't want to take chances because then people throw it back in our faces. But I'll take a chance. Tobias is one of my favorite tournament plays. I wrote an article about DBP today, and one thing that I found is that Houston has been so garbage on the wings this year as far as like plus minus allowed to positions, like especially shooting guard and small forward. And I think we have this idea that Ariza is a good defender. And I think it was true at one point, but I don't think he's been very good this year. And I think that's shown like when you adjust for salary and look at these guys. So I think Tobias is in a great spot. I think the same would be the case of Oladipo. I don't think there's probably enough upside to go both, but I think that if Elf is out, I think one of those guys is going to go off. So I actually really like Tobias because I think that he would be like the really under-owned guy in tournaments that could go off instead of Depot.
I totally agree, and I think there's legit 40-plus point DK upside with Tobias. He's shown that this season. He just had 51 against Portland 3 games ago. So, we've seen that range from him. That ceiling is what I really am looking for. And, I think, we talk about this in football a lot where there's funnel defenses where a really good run defense and you want to attack the passing game. And maybe similar things in basketball where Vooch might not be as effective in the post against Dwight, so they might have to go look elsewhere. And Tobias is definitely one of those other options that might eat and might crush and might have a big game in this circumstance. So I'm totally with you on Tobias as a tournament play.
Cool. All right, let's keep on moving then. The next game we'll talk about is Memphis at Washington, another 7 o'clock game. And the line that I have is 202.5, and another close game. We got a lot of close games actually tomorrow. This one is a 1.5 as well on the Wizards side, which is fairly odd to me, but
more of an indictment to where Memphis is right now, I think, than Washington.
Yeah, that's fair. So Jay, I'll start with you. Your kind of thoughts on this game and the line and whatever you're thinking, Jay. Let us in.
Yeah, I think the back-to-back is a pretty big role. These Memphis guys have been playing pretty heavy minutes lately. You got to consider. Tony Allen did come back tonight, so it kind of left. It actually, it surprised me with the minutes structure for Barnes and Green. I thought Green would be that guy with more solidified minutes with Tony Allen back, but Barnes saw 29 minutes, Green only saw 19. And a part of that has to kind of do Barnes was playing well against Philly. They didn't really need to run these guys in the ground in this game, luckily. So some of that opens up, it makes me feel better about the back-to-back because they didn't really play full minutes. But Wizards have been a bad defense, all year. So I think there's value here. I'm assuming Tony Allen's going to play again because he played tonight, but that's something to maybe monitor his knee just in case. But, value-wise, I think you can look at kind of Conley just because of his price. Lately, he's been very underpriced. And, Marc Gasol is another guy who's still logging those big minutes at the center position. So cash-wise, Tony Allen back, I think it's hard to kind of go either Green or Barnes, especially if they kind of flip-flop minutes. It looks like Allen's going to come off the bench for the foreseeable future and whatnot, but there's still, he's still going to get minutes and kind of take away minutes from Barnes and Green or make them kind of eat each other's minutes a little bit. So cash-wise, with their prices, it's kind of hard to commit to one or the other, really, with these spots they're in. So.
Yeah, I don't mind Conley at all. He's shown 40-plus DK point upside, so maybe more you can look at him in tournaments. And we'll mention with John Wall that he is incredibly banged up right now. He's got a bone spur in his ankle/foot, also dealing with something with his knee, a contusion, and some bruised ribs as well. So he shouldn't even be playing right now. And maybe this is a spot to attack with Conley. Especially he's a guy that generally under-owned, so you're going to get him at a really favorable ownership level. So I don't mind taking a look at Conley at all. I think I don't love Marc Gasol against Quartet. I'm not dying to play any of these other guys. I think you can look at Barnes at 5,700, but like Jay said, I worry about the floor there potentially with the minutes in flux a little bit. I think people I think people will probably be chasing points more than they are making a sharp decision when it comes to Barnes. So I'll probably fall on the side of fading him in the spot after he came up with that, I think 12-10 line on Tuesday. So yeah, that about wraps it up for Memphis for me.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a whole lot of value with these guys because everyone's been on them lately, and with their minutes coming down and their ownership going up and their prices going up, yeah, it's just kind of a perfect storm of probably you want to fade them in this spot. I don't think there's a ton of upside. The guy I'm really looking for here is Conley, like you guys said. Fairly interesting. So, I wrote this article on DVP. So they have they're the 8th best against point guards according to DVP. Like if you want to look on like a site that gives you DVP information, but they're actually the 24th best. So they're the 6th worst team against point guards. So potentially people would think that, John Wall is like playing good defense. And I think John Wall is a good defender. I think he's like been burdened by like the fact that everyone's injured and he has to step up on offense. Plus I think every part of his body is injured right now. So that probably hurts on defense too. So, but I still think that people are worried about this matchup, but I don't think necessarily we should be. So I think Conley is a great guy to target really in cash or GPPs. I think it's a good spot. Washington's also really bad. I think they're the worst team in the league against shooting guards and small forwards. So I think you can potentially, if you really just want to go one of these guys, I think it's fine. I think they'll have good games. The problem is, like we said, with the ownership and price and everything, it's tough to pinpoint exactly what the rotation is going to look like and whether they're going to be value. But, I don't mind that for sure. But Conley is really the guy I think that I'm looking on as well.
Conley has a really favorable price too. It's really cheap. On a smaller slate, I'd probably recommend him more in cash, but you could probably have some tournament exposure. I think is definitely necessary. I think on this big slate though at that price.
For me, Conley's a tournament only play. I don't, even at his price point, I agree with Jay in a kind of a normal situation, but second leg of a back-to-back on the road, I ran a trend and it's -1 points per expectation. It's not a great spot. He's far better, I think, +11 on the second leg of a back-to-back at home. So that this is a spot where, generally a lot of factors here that I like, but there's that one that worries me a little bit to where I go tournament.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. If you find something like that worries you, again, on this 13-game slate, you don't have to settle for plays. There's a million plays. So, find a guy that you like better, and I guarantee there's plenty of them. So let's go to the Washington side. And Jay, we'll start with you. Obviously we've been talking about Walls just super injured in really every area, and Washington's just kind of hit from every angle, Beal and Porter. So I'll let you kind of run through those.
Yeah, it's going to be tough with Wall. His price is definitely up there now, so I think that makes it a little easier with how many injuries he's dealing with on this huge slate to kind of not go him in cash. He's really expensive now, and he's been paying it off. He's been playing out of his mind, but I think it's a situation you can kind of look at and be like, he has so many nagging injuries he's dealing with. It's like a spot you could say, I wouldn't be surprised, if you saw him maybe leave early or just kind of not, look for passes more, assists more than kind of his own shot. And I think, we saw last game he had 18 assists, I think. 19. So, so that's huge, but something you can't really expect a lot in that spot. And if he's not shooting enough, I think it just makes it more difficult for him to kind of reach value. And we got a lot of injuries with this team still, so that's probably kind of why he will play. But you never know with that many injuries, kind of with your ankle and your foot and your knee, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So Nene and Gooden are still out, so their front court's still pretty thin, obviously.
And they just released Ryan Hollins too, so even thinner.
Yeah. So Gortat, definitely big minutes there. He's a guy I like a lot, but obviously the tough matchup with Gasol. So I think it's fine though going him in tournaments for sure, just with kind of his volume and minutes. Gary Neal's questionable with the back injury. So this is a team that has a very tight rotation. especially if Wall's not looking for a shot. You got to think the other guys are kind of bumping up usage rates. So, you look at Otto Porter is questionable. I think it's looking like he likely won't play in this one. So you have guys, this is kind of a lot of value you can kind of find in this team. Oubre is a guy, I think we kind of like saw his floor, or kind of, he's not a guy on this big slate you want to really take a risk with, especially if like Elf is out or we have other guys kind of open up. I think Oubre is a guy you can, it's just a kind of limited sample size, and I think he has kind of a low floor that you want to avoid on this big slate in cash.
Yeah, I totally agree there. I think if you're going to take a shot, you probably go back to Garrett Temple. You might want to consider that. I think he's probably the only guy who's shown legit, 30-plus potential and a pretty decent floor given the minutes that he's going to see with Bradley Beal still out. Yeah, Wall's a tough call because my head will say fade him, but my heart, it's really hard to fade Wall given how well he's been playing and how he's pretty much at or has exceeded or approached 50 DK points on every night. He's just been, his role on this team with, you're looking at who they're trying out there from the 2 through 4 spots. He just has to do so much within this offense, and his projected workload and usage is so substantial that, even at 9,700, I think you're not losing a lot there. I think it's probably a slightly positive play, but on a fuller slate, you can probably find better options. So his tournament ownership level probably going to be high enough to where you're not, it's 2+ EV, which kind of takes him out of consideration there too. But I don't know. It's kind of a weird spot with Wall where I don't know. I'm kind of in a quandary with both cash.
Yeah, that's what makes me kind of get off him on cash, because you have he's 10K on FanDuel now. It's the highest he's been all season. So you have guys like Durant is right there. Boogie's cheaper. You have guys that are healthy. And I think that's just, they might not score as much as Wall, but like Wall, he just admitted, he's dealing, these injuries are hurting him. So it's just a situation. I feel like, when we tweet like John Wall heads to the locker room and everybody tilts, like it's something that I will say, I saw it coming. Basically, it's a situation like that where you can't be too surprised. And we're trying to eliminate those situations overall, kind of long term. If you play every night, these are the situations you want to avoid to gain an edge and kind of not get screwed by that one guy who's 10K, maybe leaving the game early. And yeah, Temple I think is solid value, especially if Neal is out, obviously. Porter's another guy logging big, Dudley. It's another guy logging big minutes, and I don't really like his kind of per minute. It's pretty weak, but his price, I wish it climbed more to kind of just totally write him off. He's always kind of in that spot where you're like Dudley, do I go him? I think on this slate you can kind of not go him.
Do you think he's more? I don't know. With Dudley, it's kind of with him. I'm mostly off him in cash just because the floor. Because I've seen him go like 30 minutes and put up like 1 or 2 DK points and just be incredibly unproductive. Even if he's seen close to 40 a night. But is he a guy? Does he have enough upside to be worth considering in tourneys in case he does actually produce in those minutes?
I don't really think so, honestly. I don't think so either. It's not a guy I'm looking at tourney. I think he can pay off his price. He's 4,100 on FanDuel, and that's what I don't like seeing a guy who's playing 38 minutes a game at just 4,100, because you kind of have to consider him. But it's dangerous. It's a guy who can play 40 minutes and get you 13, and that will kill you regardless of his price, especially on this type of slate.
Yeah, but he also okay, well, this won't happen, but he had 42.
Yeah, right.
And he's pretty much been close or around 25 DK points like recently. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. He's 4,500 on DK.
Yeah, so it's like
a little more, and you got to play 2 on FanDuel. So on DK, tournament wise, I think we got. I'd rather like pay up for Durant at small forward and kind of find value that you think can exceed deadly on DK. I guess FanDuel at 4,100 for your second small forward spot offers, I think some unique tournament exposure. And even if he gets like 28 or something at 4,100 on
that's
this,
like almost 7x.
Yeah, you can have like a really good team. And I think he's capable of getting that. I don't think it's likely, but he definitely could with all these injuries. This is a really, really thin team.
Yeah, so I'll give my thoughts on Wall before we move on, since you guys hit on the other ones a lot. But so I think that, if you take out the last game, I think he was going to be trending down with these injuries. So, I mean, he obviously only scored 12 points, and I don't think he's looking to score necessarily as much, and maybe that has to do with his injuries. I guess he took 15 field goal attempts, so it's pretty good. But, the 19 assists worries me because it was against Sacramento, and obviously with a guy who is really relying on assists, and especially 19 assists to hit 50 DraftKings points. I don't think that we can count on his teammates to really score and to finish those assists. It's not like a guy who's depending on scoring or something else that can just do everything himself. Like Wall can dish out great dimes even when he's injured, but he's relying on not great players to finish those buckets. And I think those come a little bit harder against Memphis. So I think that there's definitely some downside here, and I just don't think you need to go on the cash for that reason. I think that potentially, if we just remove this game, remove the last game, or maybe he has 12 assists, do we look at him the same way? Probably not. We probably start thinking, okay, well, maybe the injuries are bothering him. So I don't know. I'm always skeptical to be that persuaded by one game. And if you take it out, where would you think about a guy? So, yeah, for cash, not really for me. But Go ahead.
No, I mean I agree, but at the same time, to play devil's advocate,
it's hard. Yeah,
this do indicate usage, and that's my main draw with John Wall here, is that he's going to be so involved in every single possession because they don't really have many creators out there on the court. They have a bunch of role players. From 2 through 4. So I'll side with my head and your guys' arguments and saying there's downside a little bit too much here to seriously one amount of cash.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep on moving. New York Cleveland's the next game we'll talk about. There's no line on here. It's really just because of an injury. So we'll jump right in on the New York side to Jay.
Yeah, this is another big one here. Melo's questionable with a sprained ankle, so that's obviously a huge piece of information you kind of have to monitor here.
That's minor though. The main injury here, right. obviously.
Kyle O'Quinn.
There you go.
Which is huge. He's questionable with an ankle injury as well. So,
that changes the whole slate, really.
It's pretty big. So this is interesting because Lance Thomas is always kind of a guy I laugh at and just be like, oh, Lance is drawing a spot start. I'm not going to get tricked into that. But he's actually been playing pretty well lately. This is a game I think if Melo's out, it's something how can it not be a blowout type game? So it's kind of worrying to, go any of these Knicks guys. I think Aflalo would get a really big usage rate. I think he scored 31 last time Melo was out. The only game Melo's missed. So, and Lance Thomas drew that start. I'd expect him to draw the start if Melo's out for sure. So you got guys like Lance would be an option, I guess, just based kind of on minutes and price. It's obviously a tough matchup, and they're likely to get killed. Let's say Melo does play. He's really the only guy I'm looking at here for tournament side too. I'm not on him in cash, especially dealing with an injury. He might not be 100%, but still play. So the Knicks are a team that I'd write off in cash, assuming Melo plays. If Melo doesn't play, for cash it's still tough, but it makes me I like a follow for tournament plays if Melo's out, and I think Porzingis would kind of have a larger role. They'd look to feed him the ball a little bit more there. So I also would like his tournament upside a lot as well.
Yeah, I'm with you more on Porzingis in tournaments. Aflalo's fine too, given his projected role. I don't have a problem with that. I think another guy I don't really like in general, but if Melo is out, a dart throw you can look at is Derek Williams coming off the bench. A lot of garbage time for him, and they'll need some guys to pick up the scoring a little bit. And I think this kind of projects to be a game where he might see a little bit more time than usual. And we know what he can do kind of on a per minute given the amount of shots he likes to take, and his general athleticism. He can do some rebounding as well. So kind of a dart throw. If in tournaments, if Melo is out, but yeah, otherwise, his team from top to bottom doesn't really do it for me at all, especially in this matchup against Cleveland.
I'm really off of New York really in this matchup, kind of even whether Melo plays or not. Honestly, if he does play, I think I'm off of them entirely. Cleveland is like the best team against small forwards, I think, when I was looking at the data this morning. So Melo is obviously not getting cash for that reason because of the matchup with LeBron. I know people are saying that he's not as good a defender as he used to be, but I think he's still good enough to in a 13-game slate to bother Melo. So I wouldn't go that route. Porzingis, Cleveland just shuts down bigs. So I'm not really interested in him. Really in cash or tournaments. I guess you could say just 7-1 on DraftKings. I just don't think there's really upside here. If you look at really any guys who has played against Cleveland in the last 3 weeks and look at I'm talking big men and look how they performed against Cleveland, it's all brutal, under 20 points, even if they're big name guys. So off of them, Afflalo would be the only guy I'm somewhat interested in tournaments if Melo is out, just because of that huge game that he had without Melo. So he's kind of interesting to me, but even that's fringe. So really just kind of off all of them, maybe some Afflalo in tournaments here or there if Melo's out.
I know we laughed earlier, but what about if O'Quinn is out? You'd like to think that Porzingis would kind of get a little bit more minutes there. I think Lopez might see a bump, and Kevin.
Yeah, I think the real implication of O'Quinn being out is just his minutes go to Kevin Seraphin. I don't think there's a lot of transfer in terms of Zingis, and I agree with Brian about the point about Cleveland's interior defense being pretty stiff. But in tournaments, I think Porzingis has underwhelmed for sure as of late, and his ownership percentage isn't going to be very high. And I still like this spot where he's going to have to be the number 2 option behind Afflalo. So some added usage, on paper, I don't know, some appeal, but not a strong tournament option by any means.
Yeah, I just think I agree with whoever said earlier that I think it would just be a pretty big blowout here. Mm-hmm. So if Melo was out, I think it actually probably would be probably a blowout regardless, but I think you could get pretty out of hand really, really quickly. And obviously in cash, you don't want to be banking on garbage time. So I wouldn't really look too hard at New York guys for sure. But Cleveland side, Jay, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so again, this will depend on Melo's status a lot for who I like in this game. If he's in or out, I think, that's why the line hasn't been released. So it would swing a lot. Mo Williams is questionable with a thumb injury. So that's definitely something to monitor. Kyrie's price and his, limited minutes, I think you can pretty safely write him off. He's not going to play full minutes or anything in this game. So especially if Melo's out, you could see even shortened time. So really it's a spot, I think you can look at LeBron. We have a lot of guys priced high that are in pretty good games overall. And I don't think this is really the best spot, especially if Melo's out, given that, he might not play full minutes. So I think you can look at other prices really for some, if you're spending up on kind of a top stud. I think it's a tougher matchup for Kevin Love, obviously. So cash wise, really, I'm not on anyone on Cleveland in this game. New York plays a really slow pace. It's not really a team I like to kind of go against.
Yeah, and I think you kind of look at the Cleveland Cavs last game against the Sixers as a blueprint of what to expect in this one against New York, a game that we both all expect to get out of hand, especially if Melo is ruled out. And in that game against Philly, there wasn't really anybody of note that provided much value. I mean, LeBron finished with 42 DK points, which is not good at all for his expectation and his price tag. Dellavedova put up 31 in 22 minutes and change, but that's not something you want to bank on. If he's only going to play somewhere from 20 to 25 minutes, especially with Kyrie Irving back, then I'm just off him in general. I'm not going to put all my eggs in the basket and count on garbage time for him to supplement his stats, especially since Philly's defense is even worse.
Way worse.
Way worse, yeah. So I think this is what's likely in going to happen with Cleveland is just a bunch of timeshares at every position where each guy's not going to play a lot of minutes just because of the game flow. Yeah. And
they're gearing up for that Christmas matchup.
Exactly. So I think we're going to just see everybody in that 10 to 25 minute range, and with Kyrie back and Shumpert back in the lineup, they have a lot of bodies to throw around. They can go to Jared Cunningham, Anderson Varejao, James Jones, Richard Jefferson. They have some bodies to throw out there for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of a fade for me. Like I really do think that this game isn't going to be very close, and I think that Cleveland's like really looking ahead to that that matchup on Christmas against the Warriors. So yeah, I don't think they're going to extend their guys a lot. I think they're going to roll out the big three and try to get them a little more comfortable with each other, but then not give them a lot of minutes. Like even Kevin Love, who you would think maybe like with Kyrie they would still give him a little run to like keep his confidence up, but he still only got 22 minutes against Philly, so I'm not really on that narrative. I guess you could think LeBron could like just take over in the first half and like get enough where it doesn't matter, but again, like you don't want to bank on that in cash for sure. So as boring as it sounds, this game's just kind of a fade for me, except for some tournament dart throws here or there. So yeah, let's keep on moving. Next game, Sacramento at Indy. And the line I have it is high, so it's one of the higher ones of the slate, 212, and the Pacers are 7-point favorites. So let's start on Sacramento side. Thankfully, no really big injuries for the first game to monitor. So just we'll jump right into maybe your cash plays and thoughts on the Sacramento side, Jay.
Yeah, I think Boogie's still a guy we got to look at here pretty strongly. Indy's been really bad against centers. They're really bad at rebounding kind of overall, obviously with the loss of Hibbert. So I think Boogie could definitely take advantage of in this game quite a bit. His price is still not kind of where it should be. He's coming off a relatively lackluster game last game, but that's not really enough to scare me in cash. More so on DraftKings, I would prefer him than FanDuel. I think we got some kind of nice value at center on FanDuel, so he's a guy I'm definitely looking at power forward on DraftKings for cash in this matchup and this high total that the Kings are really getting used to here.
Are you worried about Boogie's, his condition, his if he's truly kind of playing at his peak level, because he's been really lackluster, especially in the last couple of weeks. Like he's barely cracked 50 DK points, which has been like, we joked earlier, but like at prime Boogie, where he was playing at his maximum level, that was close to like kind of like a floor of like what we expect from him on night, and he just hasn't been at that level. I think what is it? I think the assists for sure have been really down. I think he has 14 over his last 5 games, and then I worry a little bit here. I think the matchup is right, and obviously I'm a big fan of DeMarcus Cousins, but does his recent play kind of shy you off him at all?
I've actually been watching him a lot, and he's been very frustrating to watch. He's not playing he goes on so many spurts where it's like he dominates for a stretch, and then he'll just kind of walk up and down the court. He'll get really stubborn about a call that doesn't go his way and whatnot. Really, the thing I'm looking for here a lot is his rebounds, and especially on DraftKings, I really like targeting my big men to get double doubles. That 3-point bonus, I think, is kind of underrated to target almost, and I think Indy, with their poor rebounding, is a team that I'm almost penciling in, a Cousins double double here, and that's kind of a reason that pushes me from that maybe 42 to 45 point range to kind of that 48 to 51, something that will pay off his value. And either way, he's been somewhat, not what we want him at, especially what we know Boogie to be at, but he still has a pretty high floor. So, it's something that I'm probably willing to risk in cash, banked on the fact that I think he will double and get that bonus. I think his rebounding, he's had some games lately, like 8 or 9 rebounds where he's just missing that double. And I think that 3 points kind of swings him quite a bit from like a cash game play that you can maybe overlook, or a cash game play like, you're getting 49 or 50 points from that. It's pretty solid on this slate.
Yeah, and his steals have been up like lately too. So I think that's like pretty good and something you can count on. I think
blocks are down though a little bit for sure.
Yeah, sure. I do think that a little of it is just like, I think maybe we're little recency bias just because of maybe like his past opponents. Like if you look at his game logs, he's coming off, back-to-back games on the road on the East Coast against Washington and Toronto. Like Washington's obviously not good on the perimeter, but we've said that they're really good down low with Gortat. Toronto is obviously good defensively down low with Biyombo. He played Dwight Howard before that in New York. We've talked about really good in the post. Utah with Favors. OKC with their defense with Ibaka and Steven Adams. So, I mean, it's not like he's coming off like really good matchup. So maybe that has something to do with it.
He's been shooting really bad. Just looking at his game on his last 8 games, he's had a lot of really, really bad duds. And he's still kind of getting over 40 points on average.
Killing it,
yeah. I could be talked off him in cash. He's definitely a tourney play I like, depending kind of on his ownership, which I think I don't think it'll be anything out of the ordinary we'll see from Boogie. I don't think this will be one of his high ownership days. Yeah. So given the kind of multitude of these top tier pricing options, I'm fine kind of either way. It'll depend on roster construction, which other expensive guys you want to target. I don't think this is certainly not a night where you need Boogie, but I will say I do think he's a solid cash play.
Yeah, I agree with that. So just kind of quickly, tournament plays for Sacramento. I'm kind of off everyone else other than I do like Boogie in cash for sure. I'm not scared off, but the rest of the guys I'm not super on. Gay, Caspi, getting Paul George treatment, whichever one. So I'm not really on that. And Rondo, their Indy's pretty good with George Hill, and he was kind of not so great last game. So not really on them, but I do think that they're obviously good tournament plays. Rondo being my favorite, and Gay, Caspi being kind of fringy tournament plays.
Yeah, I'm good with Rondo in tournaments, especially. I think matchup isn't great, but I think obviously still has triple-double potential. And before that dad last game, I think he had a pretty good run of 40-plus DK point totals there, and he was pretty consistent for a while there. So I'm not going to be too scared off by that one off game where he only scored 2 points. So yeah, I'm fine rolling Rondo and cash, and obviously I'll toss it to Jay for his annual or daily Rudy Gay thoughts.
Rudy Gay thoughts? Yeah, so I'm expecting Indiana to switch back to their lineup with CJ Miles starting and Paul George at the 4. I think anytime you have a 213 over under and Rudy Gay playing, I think he's a fine tournament play, especially at small forward here. So yeah, I like tournament exposure in him, but yeah, cash wise, Caspi's kind of been that guy on FanDuel as of late, hovering around that 5K price range. Is this a game finally where we can comfortably kind of not pay for him anymore?
Yeah,
I'm with you. I mean, I think I faded him the other night in cash. I went Dudley, so it's kind of those two guys again. They open up kind of value there at a small forward that they're kind of going to get minutes. But I think we saw Caspi got in foul trouble last game, so that's kind of something, to not really write him off. He's still 5,100. I wish they'd raise his price a little more, but yeah, it's someone in this spot with kind of the matchup purposes here that I'm not looking at in cash.
He does have some appeal though, because like you said, the rebounding. I think this is a good spot for him to get 8 to 10 rebounds for sure. He's gotten double digits in 2 of his last 7. So he's been kind of around that.
Kind of inconsistent a little bit.
Yeah, but maybe this is a spot he can come through and post like kind of like a 14 and 10 type line. You can get away with it. Have some sort of appeal. I think this is obviously not a guy you want to start your rosters with, but if you're putting a tourney roster together and end up having enough to cover him, then I don't necessarily mind him too much.
Right. Cool. I agree with a lot of those points. We'll move on to Indy before getting to the next game. I think this is a super intriguing spot to target Indy. The problem is that no one's getting consistent enough minutes outside of PG to really do anything with. So I think PG is a great play. And really, I know he's been struggling lately, especially with his shot, and I get that. So, like, if you're still worried about that and really want to see it from him before you go him in cash, like, I'm fine with that, especially in this big slate. I do think he's underpriced at 8-9 relative to probably where his talent level is, and I know he's had some tough games lately. But so I do think he's an elite tournament play, but he's kind of it for me on Indy's side, and I think I'm okay with him in cash, but I can understand if you're not.
Yeah, he's at 8,900, and it was just a week and a half ago where he was, I think, 10-2. So This is a pretty significant price drop, one that we can kind of see coming with the way he's been playing. And he's coming off a horrible game, obviously against Kawhi, which is no surprise. But this is a really juicy game, and I think it's a great spot for him to get back on track. Given his struggles and kind of, I think defenses are kind of keying in on him more a little bit. So I'm not ready to really kind of pounce on him in cash, but it's definitely a favorable price and absolutely one of my favorite tournament plays on the slate, given his upside here.
Yeah, I think not only for all those points that you guys made, but I think that starting off with him in tournaments gives you a super unique roster construction because everybody's going to be paying up for the guys that are close to 10K or above, and he's at 8,900, the 10th highest player. 10th most expensive player on this slate. So if you start with him, then I don't think a lot of people are going to be looking at him as their number one building block for their tourney teams. So I think he definitely opens up some things there. And maybe the other guy that I'm looking at here is Jordan Hill. He's put together a string of really solid performances. Maybe a spot where Yamahimi gets in a little foul trouble trying to deal with Boogie, and Jordan Hill sees extended minutes off the bench. They're playing from behind potentially and maybe need to catch up. So I like Jordan Hill here as a tournament play and kind of the only other option from this Pacers team.
Yeah, I generally always like Jordan Hill. He's legit double force, off the bench, and I think that's huge. And yeah, I could definitely see him playing more time here. Another guy I'm looking at for kind of sneaky tournament play is CJ Miles coming back in the starting lineup. I think this matchup in the Kings kind of giving up a lot of easy threes. I could see CJ Miles kind of easily paying off his value with some tournament exposure, getting some tournament exposure to a game with a 213 total.
Cool. All right, let's keep on moving. Dallas at Brooklyn's the next game we'll talk about. Let's see, over under 198.5. So fairly, we're have a couple games here where they're a little bit lower, but it's a close game. Dallas is 3.5-point favorites, and some pretty big injury news, especially from their game that they play tonight, being Tuesday, in preparation for the back-to-back on Wednesday. So Jay, we'll start with you on the Dallas side.
Yeah, the big thing about tonight was Darren Williams left the game early with a hamstring injury, so that's absolutely something to monitor. Devin Harris has already been ruled out, so they would be pretty thin on the guard part. We got Chandler Parsons has been cleared to play back-to-backs. Carlisle said earlier that he'd give him more minutes, but I think right now he's looking at 30 minutes in each of these back-to-back games. So, I think at his cheap price, you can kind of look at him a little bit there. With Darren's status, I think if he's out and you already have Devin Harris ruled out, I think Felton deserves a pretty hard look here against Brooklyn. Felton triple-doubled in Darren's last game he missed, and that was with Devin Harris and Barea. So short, Harris and Williams, I think Felton's kind of a guy that you could take a pretty strong look. I know his price is kind of elevated to where he's probably not a must play. But I think if they're that thin in the backcourt, I think he makes for some really good value here.
Yeah, and Darren Williams said he felt the pop when he strained his hamstring. So I really highly doubt that he'll be ready to play Wednesday in the second leg of a back-to-back. And yeah, this is a prime Felton spot, and it's pretty easy cash given his projected minutes and role. Especially with Darren being pretty high up there in the totem pole in terms of usage. That's some shot attempts and extra possessions that Felton will have to account for. I think Parsons is a really good call. I worry about what he'll be like in the second leg of a back-to-back, and in trying to find his legs. He's kind of been up and down so far this season. Had some really high points, like recently coming off that 31-minute showing where he looked really good, and some really low points as well. So Parsons is obviously definitely more tournament for me. I think you can take a look at Wesley Matthews as well. He's going to have to see more usage and minutes in that backcourt. That's going to be decimated. So, that about does it for me. I don't think Dirk is really a strong consideration for me at this point. He looked pretty good on Tuesday, but at his age in the second leg of a back-to-back, probably not a spot that I'm targeting at all.
Yeah, I agree kind of all around. I think Ray is, one of the best cash options on the slate if Darren's out, which it kind of sounds like he's going to be. So I think Ray is a kind of a good guy to maybe start your cash lineups with. I think he's probably a pretty solid lock to hit value and exceed it by quite a bit. So I think he's a great play. And you're right. I think the really only guy potentially for me is Parsons, but only in tournaments. He didn't play. Yeah, he's just so up and down. Like, I know he had that game. What was it? 2 games ago now, I guess. But he played well. But whenever I've seen him, I just really haven't been impressed. I know that's anecdotal, but he just hasn't seemed like the same guy that he was. And I kind of want to see it a little bit more. So he's kind of tournament only. And really that's kind of how all the Dallas guys are for me. They're obviously a little bit older team. So on a back-to-back that worries you. Tournament only, I think there's guys you could target in tournaments.
What about Zaza on this matchup?
Yeah, that's the guy that I was looking at for sure, and I think there's a lot of upside in tournaments. Brooklyn's not exactly the stoutest defense, especially down low, so I think there's definitely double potential here for sure. And at 5'7", I think that's pretty reasonable for Zaza for sure. So he would be the other guy that I'm looking other than Parsons. But really, it's kind of Ray is the guy that I'm looking at really in all contest formats that I love.
Yeah, and Felton's he's point guard on FanDuel 4,900, and he's actually shooting guard on DraftKings 5,400. So I think he's hit 20 points or more in 10 straight games on DraftKings, and that's with Darren Williams. So he's a guy that I think you kind of want to build your cash games out, assuming Darren Williams misses the game.
Yep, I agreed. So Justin, we'll kick it to you. Start off with Brooklyn. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, Brooklyn, Brook Lopez, Thaddeus Young. I think they're okay. I just don't like to target anybody on this Brooklyn team, especially on a full slate. I don't think anybody really jumps out at me as someone that has a great shot of exceeding value. Maybe you would look at Jared Jack, but Shane Larkin is supposed to be back from his concussion on Wednesday. I think he's probable. So that removes any sort of extra minutes you were looking for from Jack with Donald Sloan as the only backup. So not a team I'm generally looking to target, and not really interested in Joe Johnson. I think you're really chasing points if you're looking for anything from Bojan Bogdanovic either. He has a tendency to have 12 points in a quarter, then go completely MIA the rest of the game. So not a guy I like at all.
Yeah, Jay, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely agree with that. This is kind of more of a kind of tournament team. I think Jack is coming off 2 horrible games, but he had 2 massive games in a row. But the probable return of Shane Larkin kind of gets me off Jack. And he had a really cheap price those 2 games where he crushed and had Larkin out. So I think that's a guy you can kind of get off of a little bit. I think Brook Lopez is definitely really interesting here for tournaments with the Mavs kind of on a back-to-back here. And, another guy, I think Thaddeus Young, kind of in this matchup, I think he could kind of create a mismatch here with Dirk. So he's a guy I wouldn't mind having tournament exposure in at all, and someone that, I'm looking to kind of fit in a few teams.
Yeah. Brook, I think, so I get a little frustrated at that. He just is so inconsistent, and I got mad at him. So I had a lineup where I had Thad Young and Alan Crabb the other night. This was last Monday night, and I just was like mad at Thad, and it was just my own like dumb biases, and I switched him out for Favors and Gerald Henderson. And that was the difference between 5th and 1st place in a GPP. So I killed myself on that one.
Get rid of your biases.
Yeah. So, so I need to like unbiasedly evaluate these guys. And I think you're right. I think that especially Brook and Thad are in a prime GPP spot. I don't think this is a great spot to look at any of these guys in cash for sure. I just don't think this is a great game to do it. Especially in 13-game slate. I just don't think you need to do it other than Raymond, obviously, just because of the massive value from the minutes and his price and usage and everything. But on the other side, Brook and Thad are really it for me on the tournament side. But I do actually kind of like them quite a bit in tournaments, so I will say that. Okay, let's keep on moving, just because slate's so massive. Detroit, Atlanta is the next game we'll talk about. Over-under's 203. Atlanta's 5.5 point favorites. Detroit's obviously coming off a back-to-back, so we'll start with them. Jay, what are your thoughts on them for tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't love this spot really for them on a back-to-back against the Hawks here. I like it more for tournament play. Brandon Jennings it sounds like he's available. He'll be behind Steve Blake. It's unlikely that he'll play. Very unlikely that he'll play the next 3 games. So it's really a situation where if there's mass injury or foul trouble, that he'll even see the court here. So
you got to play Steve Blake.
Yeah, Steve Blake is definitely that guy that you need to play. So really, cash-wise, I'm not really on anyone here, and I think tournament it's the usual too with kind of Drummond and Reggie Jackson. Although Pope with his 40 minutes, I think always deserves some tournament exposure on the fact that he kind of fills the stat sheet, which isn't very often, but he's had games where you look at price and position where he's definitely paid off and provided value in the rest of your lineup. So I think the 2 guys to look at here are definitely Reggie Jackson for one. He's a guy where when he sees over 33 minutes, he really, really has a big game here. So it's more of a minutes thing with him. And coming off the back-to-back, I'm not really expecting him to kind of go 35 minutes here. So I think I'd be a little lower in tournament exposure with him in this game, and maybe a little higher on Drummond, kind of coming off a tough matchup with Whiteside, obviously. So he's a guy I think can kind of beat this matchup with Horford, kind of oversize, overpower Horford here. So I like him a lot for tournament exposure.
Yeah, 9,400 is not a bad price. I'm not too crazy about it. He's probably not my most favorite, but I definitely think you can have some exposure there. I don't love any of these guys in the spot. Coming off a back-to-back on the road, just not favorable. And we know where the minutes are going. It's pretty well established. Marcus Morris, KCP, Reggie Jackson, Drummond. Those guys will see heavy running. Other than that, Ilyasova is a little bit too up and down. I don't love the matchup against Millsap. And then outside of that, there isn't really anybody else. So, you can pick better spots and another East versus East thriller on the docket.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely more of a tournament spot, really, for these guys off the back-to-back.
Yeah, but I think I actually really like the tournament spot for both Drummond and Jackson. They had that massive game in 4 overtimes versus the Bulls, and obviously put up huge lines in just a ton of minutes, and then really struggled, this tonight being Tuesday, against the Heat, which is kind of just natural. The Heat are just a really good defense, and Whiteside's playing better, so it's just a tough matchup for both of those guys. The Heat are pretty good in the pick and roll, so I just don't think that was ideal, but I do think it's going to lower ownership, and especially in this 13-game slate, I think people will be a little scared off that game log. So I do think it's a really good spot to target them. But you're right, cash, not really in love with this spot, especially on the back-to-back. So wouldn't target it too hard. I do love Caldwell Pope as a tournament play for sure, though. So let's go back to the other side, Atlanta, and talk cash real quick. And I guess maybe cash in tournament so we can kind of move through this rest of the slate since there's so many games. And Jay, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, the Hawks, the 3 guys I really look at on this team strongly, and with Bazemore's his price kind of gone up to where he's not a super strong option at cash anymore, really, especially with we've had more value plays kind of at that position. So it's really, Teague, Millsap, and Horford, and their minutes kind of concern me generally. The Hawks are pretty quick to rest their guys, and Coach Bud has always been smart with that. So it's kind of a spot generally with the Hawks where outside of Millsap maybe in cash that I don't really love going these guys in cash because they could just go 28 minutes, Teague and Horford. The individual matchups here, I think you can take advantage of definitely Millsap here. So he's the guy I like the most. I just think price included that I'm not really looking too strongly at him in cash, but definitely given this game that Pistons on a back-to-back, I think he's probably one of the more favorable tournament plays here.
Yeah, outside of that, I'm not really on them for the same reasons Jay said, the minutes being the biggest concern. I can't guarantee that Teague will play more than 29 minutes in a given game anymore. They're playing a lot of Schroeder coming off the bench, and I think Teague has been dealing with this ankle thing too that's kind of limited his effectiveness a little bit, and they maybe be a little bit more cautious with him off that. And yeah, Horford he's shown me nothing to make me really enthusiastic about his prospects, and he's been hit and miss and a lot more miss, especially lately. Bazemore, I think, some intrigue in a tournament just because he has the tendency to get really hot at times. And though I don't really like this spot particularly, I think just in general, I think I don't mind some exposure to him. And yeah, outside of that, not a whole lot else. No Tabo, no Schroeder, no Corver, and then they got a bunch of bodies in that front court between Scott, Muscala, and Thiago Splitter. So yeah, nothing too much.
Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time here. As I've said recently, the Hawks are not my favorite team. They just no one gets minutes and no one is any good. So I will say that I like Millsap in tournaments because I always like Millsap in tournaments, and that's about it for me. So we'll keep on moving. Next game is Philly at Milwaukee. Over under here, pretty low. Not a great game to target, as you would expect from a Philly-Milwaukee game. 194.5 is the total. Milwaukee is 10-point favorites. So start on Philly's side. Not great here, really, all game, but not this team either.
You know what wouldn't surprise me here is you have Philly on a back-to-back on the road. This is a team that the only team that beat Golden State. Couldn't you see – or the Bucks, I'm sorry. The Bucks are the only team that beat Golden State. Couldn't you see them losing to Philly now as 10-point favorites?
It would be so Milwaukee.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But that said, it's unlikely. Obviously, they're 10-point favorites. Philly's on back.
But if they win, this is going to be 88-90.
Yeah,
right. A horrible game.
Yeah, it's already a decently low total, really, and neither team is strong defensively. So that's already worrisome here. So we got Tony Rollins out. He played tonight. Kendall Marshall will start tomorrow, but he's still on a 25-minute limit. Yeah. So you can't really look at him either, especially with his limited kind of usage anyway. So 25 minutes is not great for him, even at a dirt cheap price. Really, it's like usual, it's just a brutal spot for these Sixers. Covington, I think, offers some value every now and then. Just kind of being overlooked now that he's definitely fallen off of his 7 steals per game average that he was on when we were all on him. So that's a guy I think you can kind of find value in, but not anyone really strong with kind of his lack of upside lately. We have Noel off the bench. I'm assuming he'll be off the bench again. So that just kind of limits his upside as well as Grant's. So really, I mean, Okafor's kind of the only guy I'm considering in tournaments here.
Yeah, and you mentioned Covington, and I'm off of him because he's been fewer. He's been at or fewer than 26 minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. He played 23, 20, and then 15 the last 3 games. So it's just not enough minutes. I think they're playing pretty deep on the wing there. Hollis Thompson saw a good chunk of time on Tuesday, and they're playing guys like Jakar Sampson, and then Saskia Nick Sauskas saw 4 minutes for whatever reason. Just got to throw him out there too.
He was 0 for 2 from 3 too. That's no surprise.
Yeah, but he took 2 shots at least. He hasn't taken a shot in a couple of games now. So this is just a miserable spot. I mean, I wouldn't. They had one guy crack 25 DK points on Tuesday, and that was Okafor at 25.25. So just a miserable performance from top to bottom, and at an implied of 92.3. I'm not expecting a whole lot different on Wednesday against Milwaukee.
Yep, I'm in the same place. I like Okafor in tournaments, mostly because of his ownership, and I do think that he kind of has upside regardless of matchup. So I don't mind him, but you're right. Guess you go Covington, but a pretty terrible spot here. So really just Okafor, but not even a whole lot of exposure to that, for sure. On Milwaukee's side, I do think there's some tournament guys. You're right. This spot is not great. I mean, they're pretty sizable favorites. Philly is always a good team to theoretically target because their defense is so bad, but also like every team is a 10-point favorite. So a little worrisome as far as a blowout factor goes, but I think there's some potential guys that we could target. So Jay, we'll start with you. I think especially your boy MCW and his revenge game.
Yeah, you guys were teaming up on me earlier about MCW. Throw the revenge game out. Let's just talk about how he's been playing lately and kind of his price has risen, but it's nothing absurd or anything. And this is no doubt an easy matchup for him, and the Bucks should really have problems scoring in this game more so than they have in their last matchup. So this is a spot where I kind of like MCW a bit here, probably more tournament wise still. I don't think he's really strongly in that cash realm yet. But we have Bayless out and Vasquez is doubtful, but I don't think it's appearing like he'll play. So one guy that you got to look at here is Giannis, who's got upgraded to probable today with a left knee injury. So we'll assume he plays. There's always value against the Bucks just with the amount they turn the ball over and how careless they are, and I think that kind of suits Giannis's game well. The blowout factor is definitely in play to kind of get off these guys in cash, but it definitely makes me like a lot of these guys in tournament, really from kind of top to bottom. Even Middleton, I think you can have exposure to. Monroe for sure, and especially MCW.
Yeah, Monroe, I'm a little bit worried about the minutes. I think he's played like 26 straight and 26 in both of his last games since returning from that MCL sprain. So I worry about if they're being cautious with his minutes just to not rush him back and kind of ease him back into things a little bit, especially with like Miles Plumlee playing pretty well off the bench and, them being comfortable with leaving him in there for 20-plus minutes. But I like, MCW, Middleton, and Giannis. I think they're both solid tournament plays. And I think my favorite probably is MCW for that narrative street factor. I think there's a little bit something extra in that I want a piece of. And given MCW's strong play as of late, it's even more kind of a reason to be a little heavier on him than
Yeah. And he's been shooting a lot more and more efficiently, and he's playing heavy minutes. That was kind of the big thing with him earlier was even when he was starting, he wasn't playing huge minutes. And obviously that's kind of due to the injuries. They don't have their backcourt depth here. But yeah, thinking about this more, I think he's kind of in my cash game radar. He's not he's been paying off that price really, really easily his last even like 6 games. So given this matchup and add the revenge game factor if that's what you want to do. I think it's something you can look at, especially with a player like MCW. It's something I think he can get a few extra shots off here. It's the Bucks. I think he's a great play in tournament for sure. And I think it's a guy that you can look at, on DraftKings a little bit. He's cheaper on DraftKings, so I don't think it's a bad play at all for cash. I think we have probably other value where you don't have to do that. And obviously, we didn't touch on OJ Mayo, who had a really good game last game, and people might be on him, but he drew that start because Giannis was out. So he's a guy I'm not looking at too strongly, assuming that Giannis is back.
Yeah, I will say that I'm not like a huge narrative streak guy in general, but I do think, like Justin said, I don't think Justin's a narrative streak guy either. But like there is something to this. Like, Philly traded MCW and pretty much said like, you're not like a good enough point guard to like fit into our timetable and our system, and like you're not worth like a top pick like the Bucks did. And really, I think that's going to matter to him. So you're right. Like I don't take narrative streak into account for most things, and I definitely wouldn't even consider it in cash. But like in a tournament, like does it give like a small boost up to a guy? Like yeah, for sure. So definitely like him. And you're right, the other guys, I mean, it's the 76ers. So like, yeah, target away in tournaments for sure, because one of these guys is probably going to go off. Cool. Let's keep moving. Portland, New Orleans is the next game we'll talk about. And the over-under that I have, if I can find it, no over-under, but we do have a spread. It's New Orleans at 8.5. So we'll start with Portland. Obviously, I think probably the over-under here has a lot to do with the injuries, and we'll let you go over those, Jay.
Yeah, Lillard is out with the horrible plantar fasciitis, which is why I think Amir Johnson won't play. This is a nasty nagging injury that people have. So, yeah, but he's already ruled out. So we got my boy Frazier drawing another start here. CJ McCollum is questionable with his ankle injury, so that's definitely something to monitor for sure with Crabbe and Gerald Henderson's value here. But I think Frazier's a guy, let's not forget how bad the Pelicans are at defense. I know they're 8.5-point favorites, which is huge, and Portland is pretty bad without Lillard, obviously. So, Frazier's in that spot where I think, it's hard to get kind of greedy with him after last game. He had those stretches he went on kind of where he accumulated a lot of points really quick. He had like a steal and a dunk. He hit a couple shots. Like that's something I'm not really looking at him to do. But given the minutes that he kind of has, I think I think you have to look at him really strong as a way to save on this 13-game slate.
Yeah, Terry Stotts said before their last game that on Monday that he might play all 48 minutes, and we were like, there's no way. Like that has to be a joke, right? And there were beat writers that said, yeah, he was probably joking. But he ended up playing every minute except for 25 seconds. He played 47 minutes at 35 seconds. So if Stotts really has that little faith in Pat Connaughton and is going to throw Frazier out for that many minutes, then I'm intrigued. Even with my opinion of Frazier not being particularly high, I don't think he's if he was playing 32 to 34 minutes, he'd be borderline for me. But, in that range where we're looking at, I think he's pretty easy call at 3,200 on DK. And you have his price on FanDuel there, Jay?
Yeah, he's 3,800. Yeah, one thing real quick I want to note with Frazier is, this is a guy in college at Penn State who had really, really big numbers all around, like huge, huge games. And you look, really, the sample size is so small with him and the usage rate. And last year, he had 3 starts, but it's an entirely different team. And his situation is entirely different too. He's replacing the guy who has one of the highest usage rates in the NBA. So we saw him take 15 shots last game. I don't think that's like out of the question with our limited sample size of his career, really.
You don't think it's a stretch to say he'll do that again if McCollum plays?
Well, how many shots would you put McCollum at? I mean, Crab and Henderson fire up shots too. I still think Frazier with the ball in his hands a lot. I don't expect 15, but I also don't expect like 4. Like
yeah.
I think like,
that's
yeah. So I think it's unfair to kind of judge him off his season. Last year it was just a completely different team, and I know it's not great to look at like college stats, but he had huge college games and a higher usage rate than he had last year for sure. And just the player he's replacing. So yeah, McCollum being questionable will definitely play a role in it for me. I think if McCollum's out, I think Frazier at that cheap price, I'll still go for sure. If McCollum's in, then it'll be a little bit more difficult, but I'm still leaning on the side that he'll break value.
I agree with you there. And McCollum, if he plays, will be interesting too, because theoretically I would be all over McCollum if,
right.
With Lillard out, because he's going to be that primary shot taker, usage guy, and might actually do a little bit of a good chunk of ball handling too, even with Frazier on the court. So
I mean, he played a lot of point in college. Yeah,
he did. Yeah, Lehigh. So I kind of do like McCollum in the spot, and I would consider him in cash at 6,900. I don't think it's ridiculous. The fact that he's coming off an injury and not completely 100% makes me a little nervous, but I'm not too scared about the matchup here at all. And given how this sets up, this is obviously really favorable for him.
It's tough because he's 7,500 on FanDuel, so it's like kind of a tough spot with McCollum. Like he's been decent value. There's a reason he's 7,500. He's been very consistent, really overall. And you kind of our big knock on him is he's too scoring dependent. So without Lillard, if he plays, then obviously his assists will go up, and he's been averaging about 5 lately, anyway. So I think it's a really good spot. I don't know. Would you pay 7,500 for him still?
I think it's borderline.
For sure.
And we talked about this before the pod too with Klay Thompson, how he's kind of always somehow in the consideration for cash just by virtue of the depth of the position. So at 69 on DK, I think obviously more favorable. And I would strongly consider him there at 69 on DK and cash. You're right there, Brian?
Yeah, man. I'm good. I agree. Yeah, I think McCollum's like he's okay in cash on both sides for me. Like he's a little more fringy. I think he's an elite tournament play. But I am a little worried just because I'm not sure exactly what he would look like without Lillard. Like I do think he would be okay because he did play point in college, and like I do think that his ball handling is okay and he's good enough in that. But like there is skepticism a little bit, which makes me worried. But yeah, I do think he's an elite tournament play for sure. But that's probably it. Like I would be off Crab and Henderson. I'm off Henderson regardless of who plays. Obviously those minutes went to Crab more. But yeah, so I mean, I guess you could go Plumlee a little bit here, but even that's a little worrisome to me. So not really on them too much, but I think on New Orleans side, we'll go back to UJ. I think obviously Davis is, in one of the better spots of the studs and kind of a guy you really have to look at in the slate. Yeah,
it's really rough right now with Davis because this is a guy I've given him so many passes and it just like keeps happening. It's terrifying. It's a 13-game slate with plenty of guys who are around that range. They kind of know aren't going to get like a cold or something in the third quarter or whatever Anthony Davis comes up with next. I mean, what his list is going really strong. So, we should probably start like a side pool on the next injury that pops up on the report for Anthony Davis. It would probably last like a couple of days, but yeah, this is a team we've seen Portland get blasted by power forwards and even centers that are, really skilled. So their front court is not good defensively, and this is absolutely a cash game spot for Anthony Davis. It's just if you can stomach playing him and the chance that he goes out of the game early. So I think you have to take definitely a strong look at him in cash though, for sure, in this matchup.
Yeah, maybe maybe this is a spot where you roll 2 cash game lineups out, and one with Davis and one without, just to hedge a little bit, because it is true that you can never go into a slate fully comfortable with Davis, given how many times he ends up leaving. At least he ended up finishing that last game, and came back and looked pretty good. He was a stud when he was on the court, though.
Points per minute, yeah.
Yeah, he was crushing. So obviously another really good spot for him. So yeah, I think he's definitely, on paper, at least one of the best cash game options of the slate, easily.
In tournament too, yeah.
Until he gets hurt or sick.
Right. You know who else I really like in this game?
Reek.
Is Tyreek, yeah. This is just a huge – I mean, Lillard's a bad defender, but Tim Frazier's 6'1", Tyreek's 6'6". So – and this is a guy who attacks. He attacks the hoop. So I'm really looking strongly at Tyreek here, definitely in this matchup, that he should abuse Frazier.
Yeah, he's like triple-double potential for sure here. I think Tyreek's one of the best – tournament plays for sure of the night, and I'm honestly fine with Tyreek and cash too at 7-7 on DraftKings.
Mm-hmm.
I also think a guy that's been paying off value pretty consistently is Drew Holiday, even coming off the bench. He's been a guy that's been close, maybe top 10 in my models for the last 4 or 5 games he's played in, just because he's come in, had a really high usage rate off the bench, and been at or approached 30 DK points consistently. He's obviously, his minutes aren't ideally where you want them to be. He's still in that like 23, 20 to 26 to 28 range, depending on game flow and substitution patterns. But he's proven for let's say seven games now, he's been at or above 29.5 DK points. So the consistency is there to where you feel really comfortable with him, even in his position, and and he's still very reasonably priced. So in a good spot. So I'm good with him.
Yeah, his price climbed a little bit, and I prefer him. He's 5,600 on both sides. I always prefer him. Yeah, I played him a lot, especially when he was like 4,500.
Yeah,
I always prefer him on DraftKings because of the 3-point bonus, and I like he's always good for at least 1 3. So I kind of prefer him there usually in kind of the guard spot or even the utility sometimes. Yeah.
So before we move on, I agree on all those points. So Tyreek at 7-7 or CJ at 6-9? I guess I'll answer first so I don't put you guys on the spot. I prefer Tyreek at 7-7.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
I go CJ and cash and Tyreek in tournaments. I'm a little worried about Tyreek's volatility because he's shown more recently. I think CJ is a little bit more guaranteed with Lillard out, to where I feel more comfortable with him.
I agree. I mean, this could be an Anthony Davis game where they're actually feeding him the ball finally, and he's the one getting a high majority of shots here. So, yeah, I think he's Tyreek's a little less safe here, but I like both a lot. But CJ at 6,900 I think is kind of better value too with Lillard out. Assuming he's 100%, we could read that he's suiting up and playing, but he might not be 100%. So that could swing it as well.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let's keep on moving. San Antonio at Minnesota is the next game we'll talk about. Over is 196.5, and the spread's pretty big here. A lot of these games are pretty close, but a couple of these last ones are pretty big. So starting with this one, it's 10.5 to San Antonio. We'll start with San Antonio, and then we can ignore Minnesota and move on to the next game. So, Jay, I'll start with you. San Antonio side.
Yeah, it's the usual guy for cash is Kawhi. We actually saw his price on DraftKings decrease, which I find kind of weird here. It's not like he's been playing his way down in price. I don't think so. At 8,400, Kawhi's never really a guy to start with. I'm not like looking right away to fit him in, but again, he's a great cash game player. He's got a very high floor. This is a good game for him to excel in. It's a good total for the Spurs being 10.5-point favorites. Really, the Wolves have had such a bad defense as of late that we've touched on several times here. So I really like Kawhi in this spot. I don't think I'll really go him. I like other options, kind of other lineup construction options, really, instead of kind of paying 8,400 for Kawhi. Really, the other guy you can kind of look at as of late is LaMarcus Aldridge here, but I think he's definitely more of a tournament player here. Although I do like the matchup quite a bit, especially with his kind of mid-range game here against this front court.
You worried about Gorgie Jang at all? I think he's stiffer than what they would usually throw out, like KG.
Won't KG start though?
Yeah, but he's more of a
he'll play like
paper
12,
starter, right?
Right, 12 minutes. Yeah, I think that matchup. Yeah, I like Jang's length for sure. So yeah, it could definitely be troubling, and that's why I definitely would recommend him in tournaments only.
Yeah, Kawhi, the only guy in these type of games where you feel comfortable with his minutes floor, and the only guy you can come in and saying, okay, I feel pretty good about his chances of playing 30-plus minutes. I think you can't say that about any other Spur, really. But, yeah, 13-game slate, not a great situation. If this was a tighter spread, then you take a look. But you're kind of just hoping he crushes on a permanent level enough to kind of cover for the fact that he's probably only going to play 32 minutes in this one.
Right. And he'll still probably get 35 points. But, at 8,400 and kind of other options on this slate, I don't think that's really necessary to go in cash.
Agreed. And, the other guys, they're just a little too deep for their own good. Parker, Ginobili, Patty Mills, Danny Green, Dia, and pretty much everybody else. So
Duncan's just barely playing. I mean, they're just saving him
to
crush the Clippers in the playoffs again or whatever. Maybe win this time.
He's played 20 minutes or around there in, let's see, 4 of his last 6. He's at a 29 and a 30 in there, but those are against the Clippers and the Hawks. So obviously the Wolves don't fit that mold of team. So even in tournaments, we usually like Duncan, but I think you're really pushing it in these types of game situations.
Yep, agree.
Yeah. I'm kind of Spurs are people say they're boring, but they kind of are in DFS. I don't think they're boring by any means in real life, but it's kind of just always Kawhi and Aldridge, and I agree. I don't think that either are really cash plays for me. Kawhi, I think I'm fine with, but I think I kind of agree with Jay. Like if he's the last guy in my lineup, I'm fine, but I'm not going to start with him. But I do think they're obviously great tournament plays. So move on to Minnesota before we go to the next game. But I've just kind of always said that I'm just not going to play guys against the Spurs, and I have seen nothing that would make me think any differently. So that's it.
Yeah, the 2 guys you like, Karl-Anthony Towns going up against Duncan, then Andrew Wiggins going up against Kawhi Leonard. That's just a nightmare. So, I mean, you can gamble with Rubio, but
the 2 guys.
The thing is, right. The thing is, you're going to hope for assists, and there are not going to be a lot of assisting opportunities in a game versus a Spurs defense. So,
I'm pretty fine with writing off the Wolves, even at home.
Cool. All right. Sorry about that sneeze. Next game, Denver Phoenix. No over under here, but we do have a spread. Phoenix 8.5-point favorites. We'll start off with Denver, who's coming off a back-to-back. So And obviously some pretty important injury news. Moutier's been out. We would assume he's out still, and Gallo didn't play. And Jay, do you have any read on whether he's going to be back in?
No, I think, he's just questionable now with that ankle injury, so we'll find that out tomorrow. Papa Nicolau drew the start, but it's kind of just a spot start, kind of he played 11 minutes, so it doesn't really add much other than it kind of takes away, I guess, minutes for a spot start elsewhere. But those minutes and usage, more importantly, are kind of gravitating towards Will Barton, who's really been on fire lately. And we saw him tonight. We were watching him earlier, just in that first half, just exploding. So, yeah, I think even in this matchup, even on a back-to-back, I think he'll get the minutes. And I think he's a guy you kind of got to look at here. Moutier is doubtful. So we're looking at another kind of Jameer Nelson start again. His price has crept up a little bit. So I don't think he's really in strong cash game consideration at all. But, I think he's a guy you can look at. But they have Frazier, who's a good chunk less. If McCollum's out, we'll have to play a lot of minutes again. So there are other options. I think it'll kind of depend on these injury situations a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm off Jameer in this spot against Bledsoe. Just no reason. Like you said, I'd rather have Frazier at his price and seeing potentially like 40, 45 minutes. Will Barton, Gary Harris went off in the second half, and it was Barton in the first half, and Gary Harris came through big in the second half. Could be worth looking here, but I think the usage from this team usually goes to the front court when Gallinari is out. So Kenneth Faried, Nikola Jokic. Jokic had a strong line on Tuesday. Yeah. I think it was like 15, 10, and 5 or something like that.
Yeah, he crushed. Yeah, their minutes are just kind of – cash-wise, you're looking at guys where –
so sporadic, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of never know too much.
I don't think they know.
Barton's the guy really logging really consistent minutes lately.
Which is ironic because he's coming off the bench.
Right, and Jameer's been averaging a solid chunk obviously as well, but he's not still a great cash game play. So I think it's kind of tricky with cash games, especially on the back-to-back where they can kind of utilize those guys, those extra bodies they have to kind of save these starters from playing too many minutes.
We might get a J.J. Hickson sighting perhaps.
It's possible, yeah, definitely. You never know against the smaller Suns. Yeah.
But I don't mind it though. Like I said, with Jokic, if you have 4K left, I think 4K is super reasonable for him. Even if he's only going to see like 22 minutes, he's averaging a point per minute, a DK point per minute so far this season, and we've seen what he can. He's to have potential on Tuesday. Even though it's a tougher matchup though against Tyson Chandler and Alex Len.
Right. Yeah, I like him as a tournament play for sure, though. Just given his upside, we've seen it a few times now.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So is JJ Hickson like must play cash if he's in?
No. Yeah, Hickson probably will get another DNP here. So, but yeah, I think the back-to-back's a little tough here. Did you get a total on this game?
There's none. There's hasn't been released yet. Yeah.
So just kind of Gala, I guess, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be pretty high, I think. I'd like
we would assume, right? Yeah.
So
yeah.
Denver,
honestly.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So we would assume pretty high. So we would assume a lot of points, but I would think that most of them would probably be on Phoenix side since they're pretty sizable favorites, and Denver's on a back-to-back, and Phoenix is at home. So
right. And I generally would like for Reed with Gallo out. We didn't really see it tonight too much, unfortunately. Yeah. He only took 9 shots. He played 30 minutes, and this is a back-to-back. And they really yank Reed's minutes around. So I'd be careful kind of going him if you're considering him in cash if Gallo's out. Kind of what should be extra usage for sure, but I think it's somewhat risky on this back-to-back for cash.
Yeah, I like him in tourneys though because not a really scary matchup with John Lure. Especially on the boards, I think he really dominated and eat there. So, and 30 minutes tonight is at least someone encouraging that he wasn't just totally getting yanked around by Malone. So
Right. Okay, cool. So Phoenix side, obviously a little bit of a shakeup last game. They benched Knight and let him come off the bench and started Booker. Bledsoe had an awful game, so a little bit of weirdness going on in Phoenix. I guess there's kind of a weirdness going on in Phoenix with Markieff stuff and everything all year, but it's now kind of trickled into the backcourt. So, Jay, I'll start with you. Well, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we'll see if they end up using it again because it didn't work out well. So
No.
it'll be interesting. You know, honestly, I don't know if they'll do it again. Yeah, I'm not totally opposed to having Knight off the bench. I think it's an option that is worth exploring, especially given kind of where they're at this year to where they, we thought they'd be at before the season. So it's something I think I could see them doing again. You know, maybe not Booker starting, or maybe Tucker inserting this, but they kind of needed a guy who can score, and Tucker's not really that guy. So the one thing, they've been playing really bad lately. Bledsoe, Knight, kind of all of them. So one thing to not overlook here, and this goes more for tournaments because they have been playing so bad, but is that this is the Nuggets on a back-to-back and already horrible defensive team. So I certainly like the Suns at home in this spot, and I think there's a lot of value here, especially for tournaments, especially if these guys are under-owned due to their recent play. So I'm pretty high on Bledsoe here in tournaments, and even Knight's price dropped to where I think he's a good player, and I don't think he's really going to keep struggling like this. So I look at this Nuggets matchup as one for him to kind of get out of his slump, and it makes them more tournament plays for me though a little bit. I don't think you can really pay. I like Bledsoe a lot in this spot. I just, given the way the team's been playing, kind of hard. He's not cheap or anything either, so it's a little different. We have McCollum cheaper at shooting guard. We have guys, Tyreek too. It's kind of like I'd rather go Tyreek or McCollum probably at less than Bledsoe here, even though I like Bledsoe in tournaments probably as much as those other two.
Yeah, and I will say, Booker got the start, so I guess people might think that he's a play, but he actually got less minutes even with the start. So I think it actually hurts his value because he's getting to play against the starters and then get yanked. So I don't think there's any value there. So I wouldn't look hard at him. Kind of the same usual suspects for Phoenix side. Justin, what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, it's Bledsoe and Knight. I think Bledsoe is by far my favorite play in tournaments on this team, just because he's coming off, I think, a pair of really bad performances, including obviously the last game where he only finished with 15 DK points. So prime bounce back spot in this setup. And yeah, given the way that the team is structured, I don't trust any of them in cash, and it's kind of a mess going on in the front court. Markieff Morris is back in the rotation now after a string of DNP CDs that obviously kills John Lure. His value, his run as a starter was good while it lasted. But now that they're kind of throwing Markieff back in to showcase his trade value, then not much appeal there. And then Lennon Chandler kind of splitting minutes at center. Not really doing it for me either.
Yeah, I agree. With all of that you guys said, I do really love Bledsoe in tournaments. Coming off, I think this would be a spot where I would potentially like Knight a little bit better. But just with the recency bias and Bledsoe's really poor last game, I do think that you might be able to get him a little bit lower ownership. Maybe not because of the shooting guard spot or position eligibility. So. Maybe I'm kind of even on them, but I do think that you should have, pretty good amount of tournament exposure to both of them because I think they do have still high ceilings, not only in this matchup, but kind of in general as players. Let's keep on moving. Next game, Oklahoma City at LA Lakers. Over-under is 207. Oklahoma City is 13-point favorites on the road. So obviously the question is, Westbrook and Durant could crush, but how long are they going to crush for? Is it going to be, 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, and does that hurt their cash value? It's I think it's the biggest question of this game for sure. So, Jay, I'll kick it to you and your thoughts on OKC.
Right. Yeah, that's the main concern here, especially in cash. I think this is a game where I look at them individually and, not together, both having a huge game, but one or the other. This is a very soft defense and very exploitable matchups here. They have no one at either position to even slow down Westbrook or Durant. You got Westbrook going back home. Both these guys have had huge games against the Lakers in the past, even in three quarters. So this wouldn't surprise me to kind of see a triple-double type game from Russ, even in three quarters, which we've seen him do before.
Yeah.
But for cash-wise, I think it's pretty safe to kind of write them off. They're certainly not cheap. Westbrook's 10-4 on both sides. Durant's over 10K on both sides. So it's not a spot with a 13-point spread and just really a horrible Lakers team. And we'll see if Kobe plays on the back-to-back.
Yeah, he said he expects to play.
Okay, so yeah, it's tough. And he actually played really well tonight, given it was the Nuggets. But this is a game, the way the Thunder are playing, I think they kind of roll pretty easily in this one. So it's really tough when you're assuming Durant and Westbrook will go three quarters to commit to them in cash.
Yeah, I will say that they just played a couple of games ago, two games ago, and that's exactly what happened to Westbrook and Durant. They both played 30 minutes or less and didn't hit value because they just didn't play.
Yeah, KD finished with 35 and a half DK points in that one. Russ finished with 32.3, and KD played 29 minutes and change, and Russ played 27 minutes and change. So the biggest winner of that game was Enes Kanter.
I was going to say, I love him.
Posted 19 and 14. So we know how soft the Lakers are at point guard and at center. And, obviously we don't really like DJ Augustine at point guard backing up Russ. So let's go to the center and look at Enes Kanter backing up Steven Adams. So I think Kanter definitely a really intriguing tournament play, and especially with that recent success and seeing it happen, I think really strong consideration there.
And he can do it so fast too. Like if he gets 25 minutes in this game, there's a pretty good chance that he's going to put up 35, 40 DK points.
Yeah, he put up 19 and 14 in 23 minutes on Saturday against the Lakers.
Crazy. Yeah,
Kanter definitely has that huge upside in limited minutes, especially in fourth quarters. I mean, he's crashes the boards like crazy. And going against the Lakers' second unit here, Hibbert will not be on the court when Kanter's in, basically, you assume. So
Sacre bleu.
Yeah, he definitely got upside here. I want to touch back on Durant Westbrook. I think I don't recommend playing them together, but I do like tournament exposure to one of the two. These are guys that have proven over their years of playing that they can put up a huge line still in three quarters. So given the matchup and, one of them's just really, really hot and how bad the Lakers are on a back-to-back, I still think they can end with a big line here. And they'll probably be more under-owned than you like to think against the Lakers on the road. Because of the blow. So.
I'm on Durant here as a preferred tournament option because $200 cheaper. Plus, I think everybody will be more on Russ than KD, knowing that Lakers point guards are super soft and
going back home.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And usually in these matchups, in tournaments, you want to target the guy who has the worst matchup and who the public is less on. I think it's KD in this spot.
I agree.
Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to the Lakers before we get to the last game. And I'll be pretty short in saying that I'm not on anyone. So
it's tough, and especially if Kobe plays, it just kind of limits that maybe next guy that could get some value. But at the same time, is Kobe a decent play here, tournament play, assuming he's healthy and is not feeling.
You want to test him against
Robertson?
Yeah, you want to test him against Robertson, really?
I mean, look at the way he's been playing lately. I'm saying tournament only, obviously, but what do you think his ownership will be really low?
Kobe.
Behind the whole game, they're going to have to be shooting like they usually are. What did Kobe finish? I didn't even see his final line.
Yeah, I think he had 31 points tonight, 31 real points.
Yeah, right. He has been playing better. There's no doubt. Obviously the matchup back-to-back is horrible, especially for Kobe.
Yeah.
So enough. Yeah, I don't recommend putting him on tournament teams unless you're kind of making a lot of teams and maybe sprinkle them in a few. So
I would probably go a little elsewhere and maybe look at the likes of Lou Williams, Jordan Clarkson, D'Angelo Russell, kind of look at those guys, maybe a little Julius Randle potentially, because I like the second unit, obviously, because they'll be
right.
So
and we talked earlier about the Thunder's weak second unit. So, yeah, I think Randle, if he plays a decent amount in that fourth quarter, if Byron lets him roll, then, yeah, he could put up a pretty solid line.
Yeah, against Nick Collison probably, and a lot less Ibaka.
Yep.
Cool. All right, let's keep on rolling. Last game of the slate we'll discuss, Utah at Golden State. This is the 10:30 game. The other game was the Oklahoma City LA's 10:30 game. This is the other one of the slate. Over-under's 208, and it's mostly on Golden State's side. They're huge favorites here, 14-point favorites. So Utah played Golden State pretty closely, impressively, and that was – but that was a couple weeks ago. It was at Utah, and it was with Rudy Gobert. So certainly different spot here at Golden State, and not without their rim protector. So I think obviously that changes things a lot, and I would expect it to not be very close, which kind of changes the complexion of the game. And I think you can kind of look at the game before when these two teams play, and you can probably throw that out the window, in my opinion, as far as looking at that data, just because of how different this spot is. So we'll start on the Utah side and start with you, Jay. Are there any potential cash spots here? Or guys?
No, I'm not on anyone in cash here. This is like the exact opposite of last game. Yeah, Gobert was in, which helped them compete overall, which in turn gave them more minutes. It was in Utah. Favors went, I think, 23 and 10. I think Favors still has a decent upside, but I'm just not expecting this game to be close. So, I don't like his minutes at all. It could be around like 26. So, Warriors at home, I think, in this spot, and not to mention the Jazz defense has been one of the worst in the league since Gobert, if not the worst. It's up there since Gobert's been out. So I think that's kind of that 208 total playing in, even as 14-point favorites here. So I'm not really on anyone on Utah. And tourney-wise, I think you can make a case for maybe Burke kind of off the bench a little bit if they see some extended time in a blowout, against the Warriors' second unit.
You're going to have another Burks.
I know, so you guys can hash that one out. Say there's two Burks or whatever, yeah.
I agree with that. Hayward's been playing really well, and I think if this was closer, I think I would look at him in tourneys. I'd be fine with it, even against Draymond Green. Given how so much of the offense has to gravitate towards him, I think he can sort of win in a matchup against Draymond. Obviously not ideal, but I've seen him do it in the past, and he's beaten tough matchups before. But given how this spread and how I'm worried even about his minutes, obviously takes me off of him. Going to the Warriors side, I think we're pretty much done with the Jazz. Just want to talk about Trey Lyles and Jeff Withy. I doubt that. But
you don't want Withy against Swag Zealy maybe in second?
That's a heck of a matchup, really.
It's one that I think, you'll probably touch up on.
It's not going to match. We had J.O.B. and Swagazili on the court. That
was an incredible brief moment of basketball history.
That was amazing.
Hardwood Classics might do like a whole box set series on
30 for 30.
30 for 30. Yeah, for sure.
What if I told you?
Yeah.
J.O.B. and Swagazili met.
Right. So what's your update with Bogut? I saw he's questionable, but he thinks he'll play.
He expects to play. So we have it as probable right now with that. I think it was a back sprain or something to that extent.
Better get healthy for the playoffs with that back.
Yeah, right. He's been dealing with that issue for like pretty much the entire season. So they got to definitely get him right because he's definitely a really big part of what they do. Even though Azili kind of lightens
good rim defender. Yeah.
Yeah, he can do a little bit mostly of what he does. So this game, you have to start at the top with Steph. Jazz point guard defense doesn't really concern me too much. Probably not one of my favorite cash game plays of this full slate, given the Jazz like to play down in pace. Like that's kind of how they kept it close that first time. They would just grind out the clock and try to limit the Warriors' fast break opportunities as much as possible. So I think Curry's fine in cash, but not one of my favorite plays. I'm probably more on Draymond Green, just because he's been really pushing for triple doubles pretty much every game now, and I think he kind of still has that potential in this matchup against the Jazz.
Yeah. I guess I'll go. I like Steph a lot here. I can understand if you don't want to go in cash because of the spread, but I do think you should have some tournament exposure here. I'm actually not crazy on Draymond here in cash.
Surprise!
No.
Yeah, what's new? I like Draymond a lot. His floor is just.
I love him in tournaments. Yeah, I guess maybe I'm a little worried about the spread here for him too, and maybe the matchup against Favors. I don't know. Maybe that's potentially Favors and Hayward. I think can slow him down.
Yeah, but so many of his points come from wide open threes or transition points or blocks, steals. He does
sure.
so
Yeah,
much.
I just don't know how.
It won't be like a one-on-one guarding Draymond.
Yeah, but if you think that he's only going to get 30 minutes,
I agree. Yeah, I doubt I'll play him in cash, but I still think he's a strong option with his high floor and his massive upside, obviously.
Yeah, no, I love him in tournaments for that reason. I get a little worried about the minutes.
That's fair
for cash. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I think Jay covered this in one of his cash game video that even though Draymond might not be on a projected plus minus, one of the top cash game plays at his position, I would still consider him because of that floor. I just think it's pretty much guaranteed at this point he's going to give you 35, and with a very strong possibility of 40, 45 DK points. So given that security
valuable.
Prime,
No, yeah, it's definitely valuable, but he's also $9K now.
Yeah,
so.
his price is up there to where it's a tough spot. We have a lot of options really overall, but he's a guy I think I wouldn't really mind pivoting from those 10K guys really down for a guy with that high of a floor.
I would too. I think this. I think I would like him more in head-to-heads than 50-50s where you have some upside in your cash lineups. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'll ask you guys real quick. We have seven guys above 10K. Is this a slate where we're kind of fading them? Because looking them over on DraftKings, there's 7. If you have it pulled up, but we have Curry, Harden, Westbrook, Anthony Davis, Durant, LeBron, and Cousins makes the cut. Out of those guys, 6 of them really have blowout factors kind of you're looking at. So is this kind of a slate where you think you should maybe kind of go more balanced overall, even though we kind of have guys like Frazier and it's not like a stars and scrubs night what was it, Monday was?
Yeah. It was
but we still have we still have some cheap value. So I think it's totally reasonable to kind of get one of these 10K guys in, but really they all kind of have I
still think Davis is the play
the
here.
Guy, but that's the thing. It's with it. Yeah, I agree. I think he has the best match. I like him and Boogie probably the most.
Yeah, I agree.
Kind of like a safety, but then you have Davis's injury proneness, so it's something where I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be stressing out if I don't have one of those 7 guys, which seems crazy, but.
Yeah, because we talked about you can come down to
Draymond, he's a guy that has a floor that could definitely beat a lot of these guys, assuming they play 3 quarters. If Melo's out, LeBron's floor drops. A lot of these guys' floors are relatively low.
Paul George is in a great spot at 8-9. I mean, you're right.
Right. So, you have guys a step lower, like a tier lower in price that I think, given the blowout matchups that a lot of these high-priced guys have, I don't think you really need to spend up on them.
And also, another point is that since there's so many guys right at the same price point, all in good but potential blowout matchups. Like it's not like you're going to face like a cash line. Like you're not going to face 100 cash lineups with the same stud where like you really have to worry about fading that one guy or else you're screwed.
That's a good point. I mean, yeah, these guys will probably be decently spread out on. I mean, this is a 13-game slate. I wouldn't. We've had a lot of chalk lately, just in general, with especially these value plays that pop up. But I think this slate specifically will have a little bit less chalk, barring any big news tomorrow. But we have some value guys that I think will be highly owned. But as far as these top studs, it's pretty balanced overall.
So let's look at these 10K guys again. We have 7 of them on DK. If you're projecting ownership, I'd say the two probably the lowest owned 10K guys will be Harden and LeBron, if I was to guess. Maybe KD.
Maybe Durant. Yeah.
Maybe, Durant, just because people like Russ a little bit more. But, yeah, I think Harden at 10-6 is probably the guy I'm looking at as my most favorite. Harden and Kevin Durant as my favorite tournament plays out of that 10K group based on what I think their ownership will be.
And you'll also kind of pivot off the chalk at shooting guard if a lot of people go McCollum,
Yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, I think it's a fine pivot, and I like McCollum a lot. It's just kind of getting a more unique contrarian lineup going Harden.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that.
You got Tyreek there too, shooting guard, and Wilt Barton, especially if Gallinari is out again. A lot of good shooting guard options there.
And on FanDuel, we'll just note real quick.
Raven. Raven Felton.
Yeah, Felton, true. Yeah, it's the same. So FanDuel has 7 guys over 10K as well, but Wall is 10K, Boogie's 9.9. So really similar in terms of the main 6 guys kind of, and then interchange. But Boogie might as well be 10K. It's just
$100 shot.
Right. So same thing there. I think it's something that there's a lot of value, and I don't think you need to go these guys. I think you could definitely afford one for sure, but it's not like a super. I don't think you need to take a risk on some of these really cheap value guys that have decently low floors to get one of these stars in a spot where they might see 3/4.
Yeah, Paul George is 91 on FanDuel. I like that. 89 on DK. Okay, even better.
Right. Yep.
Cool. All right. You guys ready to end this long 13-game pod?
I think so. And then is it true that we have a day off basketball after tomorrow?
It is true.
Yeah, man.
It's crazy.
Brutal.
Yeah, I think tomorrow's a good day to kind of go hard at. This will shape up to be a really good slate. I think skill will kind of prevail. I think it won't be as chalky. Cash wise, I'm talking here like, a lot of cash nights you see guys like 70% owned and 60% owned, where it's kind of like a coin flip and people get a little lucky fading guys and whatnot. But I think tomorrow is a really good Wednesday is a really good slate to kind of, really take your time and pick these guys the right way in terms of their floor and their ceiling and their likelihood of breaking value here, and picking the right value plays to match up with the right studs.
Agreed.
I'm excited for this slate for sure. I like it a lot.
Well said, Jay. Good ending on the pod.
Yeah, I'm out. Let's roll out.
JJ Hickson, cash games, win money.
When he starts, yeah.
When he starts. All right, sounds good. All right, well, good luck, everyone, for in the slate tomorrow. And then we got someone that's going to do some stuff for Christmas. So I'm not sure who it's going to be.
To be determined still, I think.
Yeah,
but it'll be good for sure.
Yeah, we'll definitely have something for you.
Yeah, we're still working out the kinks.
Yeah, the faces and the
Santa's coming early. Some unexpected surprises.
Yeah, that's what presents are about. Yeah, you can't know until the day of, right?
So you guys gotta send Jay at replies and peer pressure him to get on this Christmas pod because he's on the fence. We're trying to get him on. Trying to do a 3-man with me, Jay, and our special guest.
Guest, yeah.
So Jay's gonna be traveling, but please peer pressure him to get on this Christmas pod.
I could probably buy like 2 or 3 extra rows on the plane and just do a pod and just talk really loud on the plane, I think nobody would have a problem with that at all. So, yeah, I'm in.
Why buy the rows? Just sit next
Just
to
do it
them.
anyways.
Include them,
Oh, to just kind of show the dominance of our podcast. Like, and draw more attention, realizing that there's like 15 empty seats next to me.
Oh, yeah. No, I like that idea. That's a good point.
It could also mean other things that aren't good. But either way, yeah, let's
That's a good point.
do this Christmas information. It will be good, I promise.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I will not be included in this. So I wish you guys a very Merry Christmas, and I will talk to you guys next week. But yeah, stay tuned for stuff in the next couple of days. And as always, good luck in your contest tomorrow.
Good luck, guys.
Good luck, everyone.